So today I want to talk about two sides of the coin because the way we receive and promote things don't always make sense. And I think it's important to discuss because our kids don't do what we say, they do what we model, right? What we do. And even though we think that we're good at hiding things from them, they're very observant, right? Like I'll never understand how some church folk berate their sons for wearing dresses, wigs, and nails and stuff like that. Yet they are the main reason the Medea franchise took off like it did. So when the kids see that, they see you laugh, they see you celebrate, they see you financially back this same thing, but then you curse them for it. So it could get a little bit confusing. And that is like the conversation that they have. Anywho, that's not even what I want to talk about. I want to use the account of David and Goliath because a lot of folk know it, like they're familiar with it, even if it's not the little details. And it's a conflict between youth and elder, and it's a story about overcoming, right? Being the small person overcoming. And David and Goliath is a triumph story, is what most of us think about, and it's mostly focused on David being the conqueror. But if we keep it all the way funky, when we look at it from another perspective, that perspective, Goliath and his family, David is a murderer, right? How can we explain celebrating murder as a victory? Because it's a celebration story, especially as spirituality is concerned. This is something that I've toyed with personally and struggled with personally, like wanting to be a quote unquote good person growing up, but also feeling the need to defend and protect myself from like predatory and harmful energy, and trying to understand how much is too much and what is appropriate. And I really struggled with how to spiritually justify like celebration and feeling good about my peace when my triumph it could be another person's annihilation, right? And what does it say about my spirituality if I can only recognize the victory from my perspective as a quote unquote winner? So during this time, I was drawn to David and Goliath, and I think the Bible has a lot to offer literally, but so much more to offer is there in symbolism as well. And this story looks different literally depending on where you're standing. If you are looking from Israel's narrative, right, then David is the underdog. He is the divinely aligned youth. He is the protector of his people. When you look from Goliath's side and his family's perspective, he is defending his people as well. He's a soldier who is fulfilling his duty. He's killed by a foreign combatant, right? But he's somebody's son, maybe a brother, maybe a father. And it is a son or father, a nephew who is abruptly lost. And they don't see him as a symbol of evil, but just as a member of the family, a human being. And the Bible is not shy about tensions being resolved through battle and war, right? There are also texts that are repeatedly grieving bloodshed, even when it seems to be justified or sanctioned, is the word I like to use. And the Bible records violence is open. It does not always bless it. And a sanction is not a blessing. It's an enforcement tool. Okay. And there are several texts, including biblical ones, that use war narratives as identity forming myths, right? Not as a manual for ethic behavior, though. But religious texts are often revered as a guideline, especially the Bible, for morals and ethics. So it easily comes up in debate, okay? But looking at this account symbolically, we might glean that power does not determine destiny, right? Because Goliath would be the symbol for power. And the minority or the small are not invisible to divine. And oppression is not invincible. And so David would be the smaller, the minority. And these are the types of accounts that possibly concern southern slave owners too. It was a time when it was suggested that they have the slaves participate in Sunday services, but they most likely feared, maybe, is this a good idea? Because maybe these people would be inspired to rise up against the oppression. Because I believe, just like today, people who are the oppressors, the ones who are oppressing and are controlling, are well aware of what their role is in the situation. And they are well aware of the consequences if the people were ever able to awaken and be empowered to put their tools to good use. Because everybody has tools. We don't always use them or know how to use them. Anywho, people ask, how is God, and what we think of God as a human, as he is mostly referred to that way, right? How is God a good God if he allows killing and even orchestrates it, okay, by way of war and battle himself? But it doesn't necessarily say in the Bible that killing is holy, right? It doesn't say that enemies are disposable. And in fact, it says that, it doesn't say that God delights in death, right? At Ezekiel 18, it says that God does not take pleasure in the death of anyone. I think that's verse 32. And later on, you see David is prevented from building a temple, specifically for the reason of bloodshed, like his involvement in bloodshed. And that's in Chronicles. So we get to see right there in the text itself that there is a cost to violence, even when it is quote unquote warranted. And I find it important to point it out because there are energies that will poke and prod you, right? Perhaps conditioning you to submit to that in the name of your faith, or to be aligned, because the response is wrongdoing, and violence against you is sanctioned, because you have to turn the other cheek, and there will be a cost, right? A lot of folks say, God don't play about me. But they are not suited and booted. We are not suited and booted. We do not have our breastplate. It's in the closet somewhere. Our sword is still at our parents' house. Our helmet is on the floor in the backseat of our car under some empty mustard cans. Like, we are not suited and booted. So we have to suit up and tap in, because most times we're the ones playing about ourselves. Okay, we play about us. I had to learn that. I was fearful because I would not align. I couldn't be led by God energy because I wasn't aligned. I didn't really know what that meant. And we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. That is not the battle. And some folk are out here in full mortal combat spiritually, okay? And you will not find them without their armor and their weapons, all right? Everyone is well equipped. But nothing can be done if you will not employ the equipment that you have been issued, right? So spiritually, this story of David and Goliath is not a murder story. It's a power story. That's how we receive it. And so I'm always going to put my little metaphysical or psychological lens on it, because that's my work and that's what I do when I discuss the Bible, especially in one of the groups or whatnot. And so we're seeing Goliath is not primarily a person in the narrative function. Instead, though, he's like representing like external power, the machine, right? Fear magnified. He's this dominance that's puffed up with intimidation. And then you have David, who's representing that alignment, precision over brute force or strength, and really consciousness over the masses, right? And even though we have that vision, it does not erase Goliath's humanity, but it reframes why the story is something that is celebrated and it has endured. Okay, spiritually, the danger comes in when people literalize the metaphor and then just justify real world violence using symbolic language. You see how it all gets mixed up? So it has taken us into these inhumane places before. Those are the instances where spirituality becomes corrupted. That's without even getting into the conversation of revisions and omissions, and if the Bible is really about the Most High. Okay. I also came to understand that while my victory is wholeheartedly a celebration, it is well deserved, and I can take ownership of that. It does not negate grieving for those on the other side of the experience, and it does not invalidate it, right? I think America can learn from that type of tension, because there was a time when they were labeling land dwellers as savages because those individuals were defending a home that settlers decided that they wanted to occupy, okay? And that's really what Thanksgiving is truly about. We don't want to say it out loud, but the side that lost that battle is looked. They have offspring living today, okay? And most likely, they are receiving a side eye when their celebration is more of a memorial to their fallen ancestors instead of a victory dinner in quote unquote Thanksgiving. But there really should be room for both, with a nation built, like allegedly, we're built on Christian values, right? And so spirituality, just celebrating only the conqueror, that's training us to ignore collateral suffering when it exists. And it really rewards that domination instead of promoting discernment. And it lends to collapsing our moral complexity into some type of divine favoritism. And that's how we got colonization being justified. Abuse or tough love is reframed as something that is strength, right? Harm is excused as being God's will, right? But later you do see Jesus coming in with this whole entire framework by refusing like violent victory and pushing alignment with the will of God. Even when it would have been something consistent for a Messiah to do, to conquer, right? But you don't see Jesus being recorded as being in a literal battle, like with weapons. We see him recorded in battle with motion, with words, with vibration, with energy, right? And there's also, of course, that account of his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane when he's asking for strength to remain in alignment. And then at some point, he's finally submitting, saying, not my will, but your will be done. And that's providing an example of human struggle with the acceptance of alignment. We struggle with it. It's not always what we want, and it's not always what we think it should look like. So this event shows Jesus seeking divine help to endure the path for his purpose, even when his purpose includes great suffering. And so we get to see Jesus being highlighted in his full humanity, and also seeing his reliance on the Most High. And so Jesus is a blueprint, but that's a different conversation that we can get into altogether. So what I apply day to day in my life from David and Goliath is I do not celebrate death. Okay, I do not deny the humanity of people who have fallen before me, and even when that has been warranted. But I also do not fall victim to fear-based power, and I definitely wholeheartedly celebrate the disruption of it, right? So when you look at this story, David didn't necessarily win because he killed somebody. He won because he refused to consent to this narrative where fear dictated his destiny. And the strategy is that the story is still required. It's requiring blood to communicate that truth, right? And that is a question that has always ruminated in my mind, and it still does today. Why do humans so often need blood to feel resolved, right? We are seeing so many deaths over disagreements and differences of opinion or wants of material things. We do not live, we only survive. And when you are surviving, you will do anything to get the monkey off of your back. It is impulsive, even though it's consequential. Those things do not come into your mind. And this is what our young people have learned from us, even if we don't want to admit it. We've danced to the tune of death in our songs. We've joked about it in our video games and entertainment. And we all have a stake in it, right? It's just part of culture. But there comes a point when a shift has to happen. And I do believe that that time is now. And the best thing that I can do is try to be the change that I talk about, right? So when I'm looking at victory in my life, it's not they lost and I won, because someone once invited me to suit up, okay? And the training is indeed rigorous. But if you feel ever so inclined, I invite you to suit up as well. Not for ourselves, definitely, and learning how to do that for ourselves, but also for our children, for our future, because as Bob Marley once said, you can't blame the children, right? They can only do and act out what they learn, what they're taught, what they see, right? And so there is a responsibility that lies with us generations that come before our young people, and they say that silence is permission, right? So even when we sit back and it's not my kid, it's not mine. I'm taking care, and you do have to take care of your own, right? But I don't think it has changed that it takes a village for our children to fully realize their power and potential.